Where did the week go? Ah, golly. How are you, ladies and gentlemen? I do hope you're well. The program that talks about the things the other media won't talk about, can't talk about, choose not to talk about, I don't know. Is it woke or just, well, anyway, we won't go there. One of the things we do when we do our little court of public opinion from the garage and the heart, homemade television, I guess it is, Pete, isn't it?
Pretty close.
you couldn't get more homemade, believe me. We look at the dates or the things that have gone past, because I somehow sense or romanticize that we get some sort of sense of the future by looking at where we've been. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. This is the day, for good or for bad, that Canberra was chosen. 1899. Golly, it took up a while, didn't it? 1899, the Australian Premiers' Conference held in Melbourne decides to locate Australia's capital, Canberra, between Sydney and Melbourne, to shut up the bickering, so I'll put it in the middle. It must have been, well, in the middle, I don't know. It must have been a fairly godforsaken place to put the capital of a country. But anyway, got to start somewhere. The funeral of Queen Victoria. That was in 1901, and a grand occasion that was. Boris Karloff, I remember talking to him a few times over the years. He wasn't at all like his screen persona. Charming, charming man. Boris Karloff, The Mummy, the Frankenstein movies. Anyway, he died of pneumonia at 81. This was the day in 1969. Actress Elizabeth Taylor, she was only 24, but she was on to her third marriage. In fact, marries for the third time to producer Mike Todd, 47. Well, I don't mind being confused because she obviously was. And that year was 1957. 1349, by this date, at least 200 people a day were being buried in London as a result of the Black Plague. 200 people a day, 1349. What else can I tell you? The first use of a rocket to deliver the mail in Austria. Why Austria? I can't tell you. But I tell you, that was in 1931, by the way, on this day. Maybe that is the way of the future, deliver the mail by rocket. It couldn't get much slower, could it, really? In all honesty. Buddy Holly's last performance at the Surf Ballroom, Clear Lake, Iowa, this day in 1959. And you know all the songs that he would have been singing on that day. And of course the following day, tomorrow, the anniversary of his death. 1848, the first shipload of Chinese immigrants arrive in San Francisco, which in America is a wonderful Chinatown. You can see the early Chinese influence. Well, a lot of migrants there, I suppose, mostly attracted because of the new opportunities, but most of all the gold. The gold, the gold. Oh! I have to read this carefully. 1887, the first Groundhog Day, observed at Gobbler's Knob. And yes, there is a place in America. Who said that? Only in America, Pete. Gobbler's Knob, which is in a place called Puxatawney in Pennsylvania. Groundhog Day. What was the name of the groundhog?
Don't know.
Phil, wasn't it Phil?
No, I didn't see it.
Puxatawney Phil?
I don't know.
I know, it wasn't the movie so much as sort of really American history.
Oh.
Yeah. All the prophets, by the way, are predicting an increase in interest rates next week when the Reserve Board or the Reserve Bank Board meets. Probably on the cards. Indeed, some people are saying there'll be another 4 increases in interest rates. And I saw an interesting thing the other day that said that 80-something% of people, when applying for a loan, lie about their capacity to withstand several rate increases in their repayments. So when you go in there and you lie, you're taking a bit of a risk, aren't you? If you're not brutally honest. But then again, if you're brutally honest, maybe you wouldn't get the loan. I've been there. It's important to get the loan. I don't know. Predicting the Reserve Bank, of course, is a very tricky and risky thing to do, but their job is clear, and it's not easy either. They've got to get inflation under control. You can't pump the sort of money that we pumped into the economy during the pandemic and not have a problem. Too much money chasing too few goods and services. That is what inflation is. That's the textbook definition of inflation. Then on top of that, we had supply chain problems, shortages, and in some areas we still have those shortages. But what we don't want to do is to push the country into a recession by heavy-handed interest rate hikes. So the responsibility of the Reserve Bank Board is great. The intentional, well, they know what their job is and their intentions will be good. But you know what they say about hell, don't you? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. The International Monetary Fund say that we're going to have growth next year of 3.8, 3.9%, which is very healthy. We just have to resist the temptation to go out and spend. That is, put more money into the economy, fuel the fire of inflation, like we did over Christmas. It was a bumper Christmas for retail and for spending, and this is the hangover. This is the hangover. And we don't want the media blowing this into some kind of a crisis, and we don't need the government, which is still on training wheels, going out and doing anything stupid. We've got to leave the Reserve Bank Board to do its independent job. And a simple message to the government is that you cannot lift wages. You cannot lift wages without fueling inflation. So work out your priorities, fellas, because what you get in a pay packet, if it's eaten up by costs and charges going up, what's the point? It's a dog chasing its tail. Kanye West, about whom I know little, he is, and I'm quoting here, a significant threat to the Jewish people of Australia. For God's sake, why don't people get some sort of, and particularly the media, some sort of perspective? Kanye West is a silly rap singer, which I can't understand him. Maybe it's a generational thing, I don't know. I can't understand what he's singing about. He has some celebrity by virtue of, I gather, the relationship he has with the Kardashians. Can you really seriously believe that anyone would be moved politically, philosophically, religiously by this guy, or what he says, or what he sings about, or what he raps about? Now, I'm very proud of my Jewish blood. I've got a fair bit. My great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was the first Jewish person in Australia. So it goes back a long way. And I can tell you that there is nothing that this guy could say about the Holocaust, about Adolf Hitler, or anything else for that matter, that would in the slightest way worry me. What does worry me is that he's getting publicity, and I'm sorry, I'm giving him more now, and I shouldn't be. Just ignore the guy. Just ignore him. Now, I remember when he died, I'm talking to you about Cardinal George Pell. I remember when he died, I described him as the most divisive, polarising person in the Catholic Church, certainly in Australia. Not without controversy in the Vatican. But I see that the Rainbow Coalition is mounting a major protest today outside St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney. It'll be all over the news tonight, I would think. George Pell has been lying in state. He was there yesterday, his funeral today. The Rainbow Coalition, which is all about the rights of the LGBTIQ, plus, minus, over the top, under the bottom, over the, I don't know. The population of the LGBTIQ section of the community is about 3%, I'm told. But, you know, if you watched the ABC, you would imagine that they command a lot more attention than that population would indicate they deserve. Anyway, the LGBTIQ population plan on disrupting, harassing and haranguing the people who attend the funeral, the family, the friends, the dignitaries. Yes, a controversial, divisive figure, but surely he deserves, after his prominent life of service within the church and to the community, a dignified funeral. Certainly he made mistakes in his life, but who hasn't? Who hasn't? These LGBTIQ people are yelling, "Paedophile!" He was not a convicted paedophile. His sins were of omission, not commission. By that I mean the church, and he has to take responsibility because he was the head of the church in Australia at the time, would commonly, routinely move paedophile priests or those suspected of paedophilia from parish to parish. This, I imagine, was routine in the day. And I don't know for a fact, but I suspect this was done by the Anglican Church as well. I suspect it also occurred within the Scouts, the Girl Guides, and more private schools than you and I would comfortably like to think about. The world was a very different place in those days. We would go back and change it if we could. I'm sure of that. But frankly, George Pell's relatives and friends should be allowed to honour his life and farewell him in the manner they choose. These Rainbow Coalition people, I believe, are the ugly face of homosexuality. I mean, the homosexuals that I know are among the most beautiful, talented, creative, interesting people. I don't sort of see that among those demonstrators. And here's a funny question. I know that not all homosexuals are paedophiles, but are all paedophiles homosexuals? Here in South Australia, $33 million a year goes to the operation of Aboriginal legal aid. Most of that money, and I'm talking 90% of that money, goes to 30 lawyers. That's getting on for $1.4 million per lawyer per year. Go figure. You know, I've watched all of this stuff coming out of Central Australia, Alice Springs in particular. And I think to myself, a much better idea, is to put a fence at the top of the cliff instead of an ambulance at the bottom of it. What's wrong with these people? What don't they understand about obeying the law? I would think that tribal elders would have a lot to say about tribal law. Do Aboriginal people have a problem obeying tribal law and their elders? Or is it just white man's law and white man's policing of it? What I don't understand, there's a lot I don't understand. Why don't they care about breaking the law? If they don't care about their breaking of the law, why should we care about the number of Aboriginal people in jail? But it's outrageously high. They don't care, why should we? It's a bad view. Aboriginal people are well and truly overrepresented in the prisons of Australia from a very young age, and it's not acceptable. But it's not that they're in prison. The question I want to have answered is, why are they in prison? Why? Why are they unable to abide by the rules? I would suggest that a lot of the money that is provided for Aboriginal welfare goes, in fact, to legal aid. I'm talking 35 billion a year in total. A lot of money. 45% of prisoners in Australia are Aboriginal, and that is extraordinary, and that is totally unacceptable. Why don't we just cut to the chase? Whatever we are doing, regardless of how well-meaning or expensive, we're very good at throwing money at a problem. It's not working. It's not pleasing Aboriginal people, obviously. It's not pleasing anybody. It's not of benefit to Aboriginal people. Yet it's costing, as I say, over 35 billion a year for a small group of people to live in what is demonstrably abject poverty. A forensic accountant is what we need. That's what we need. An Aboriginal household, for example, of 4 or 5 people, would have a weekly income of $5,000 tax-free. That is not deprivation, ladies and gentlemen, or provocation. It is, in fact, enormous privilege. All of this hate against the white community should be levelled at the people who are siphoning off this money and preventing these people from getting ahead in life. But why isn't their anger aimed at them? Why us? Aboriginal people have the same benefits as white people. Then on top of that, there are some extraordinary extra benefits and payments and exemptions. You name it. Every form you fill out will have a section that asks you, are you an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, because there is some benefit in your being so. If that's not racism, I don't know what is. Aboriginal people are not happy. I get it. They don't appear to want what society is providing at the moment. Do they want a separate state? Maybe. If they had that, of course, there'd be no welfare, no legal aid, no infrastructure, no supermarkets, no booze, no Toyota Land Cruisers being provided, no free houses. Is that what you want? Please tell us, and the people of Alice Springs. It would save a lot of taxpayers' money if we just knew what we had to do to make you happy. I'll be the first to say this, that the 21st century has got a lot of benefits, a lot of pluses, but also a lot of negatives. But for God's sake, Get on the bus or off the bus. But stop trying to steer the bus into a ravine and kill everybody, including yourselves. For God's sake, stop complaining and stop the hate, the domestic violence, the drunkenness, the lawlessness. And everywhere in outback Australia you see it: Tennant Creek, the Kimberleys, Katherine, Alice Springs, Darwin, Bourke, Brewarrina. It's got to stop. And because it's out of sight, and the media, the ABC, whose job you would think it would be, it would fall to the ABC because of the size of their networks to bring these terrible stories from the outback to us in the cities. But they don't do that. They don't do that because that's not the agenda. In fact, when they did cover this very large meeting in Alice Springs the other night, on 7:30 I think it was, the narrative of that story was a meeting of 2,000 people displaying white supremacy. You are foolish people at the ABC. In fact, I think you're a disgrace. You can't get over your own prejudices. Taxpayers' money at work, ladies and gentlemen. But we can't do this out of sight, out of mind thing for too much longer. We've got to fix this Aboriginal problem. We have the capacity to do it. We have the will to do it. We have the want to do it. We just have to do it. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter Clayton and I will be back for you and with you tomorrow. Believe in yourself, and thank you for viewing the Court of Public Opinion.